So good morning, friends. Very happy International Women's Day to all of you who have joined today's celebratory webinar. This year, I was asking myself about the origins of March 8th being celebrated as International Women's Day and found out that as per the UN, it goes all the way back to the women's movement during the Russian Revolution in 1970. Pretty interesting, actually. Anyway, cut to present day, and I am delighted to host this webinar on empowering change, women in leadership, with a power-packed panel of women leaders who have scaled great heights and are continuing their upward journey. They will be sharing their experiences with all of us, which I hope will leave all of you with some solid learnings and takeaways. That's really the objective of today's webinar. This discussion will be broadly sort of divided or categorized into three segments. The first segment will focus on challenges faced by women while moving up the leadership ladder. The second one will cover some key concepts that I think all of us need to be mindful of as they subconsciously influence our behavior. And lastly, to end on a very, very positive note, the positive impact a gender diverse workforce can make at the workplace. So those are really the broad three segments into which, of course, the idea is for this to be a free-flowing discussion, conversation with ideas going back and forth. So while these are the broad segments, I understand that there will be overlaps between what we speak, from one segment to the other. The objective is to pepper this discussion with a lot of data and anecdotes, which I'm hoping will spark an interesting conversation. So you'll find that I'm toggling between sharing my screen and sort of not sharing at different points of time. The idea being to share with all of you some of the data that we have collected, which the objective is to sort of influence the conversation in a way that we can get most out of the experiences of all our panelists and speakers. So without further ado, let me introduce our panel. In the interest of time, I'm keeping the introduction very brief, right? However, our webinar link provides a more detailed bio of each speaker if any of you are interested in sort of going deeper. Our first speaker panelist is Priyadarshini Vishwanathan. Priya is an ethics and compliance leader and has a remarkable experience of over 24 years in risk management and regulatory compliance. Priyadarshini holds a BS in computer science and an MBA in finance and financial management from the University of Madras. And she has worked with very renowned organizations during the course of her career. Organizations such as DXC, Cognizant, AF Ferguson, EY, and 3i Infotech. Priya, very, very warm welcome. Delighted to have you join our webinar today. Our second speaker is Anjali Balagopal. Anjali is General Counsel at Tata Technologies. And she's a seasoned legal expert with over 2 decades of experience in corporate law. Anjali is recognized amongst the 100 most powerful women in law in India. And she holds a bachelor's degree in law and social legal sciences from ILS. Her illustrious career has spanned pivotal roles at Juriscorp, Infosys, and her current position at Tata Technologies. Anjali, delighted to have you on board today, and I'm really looking forward to a really productive, interesting discussion with you as one of our panelists. Welcome.
Thank you, Anthony. Delighted to be here as well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you too. I was unable to unmute myself, so I was struggling with that. Thank you for the intro.
Thank you, Priya and Anjali. Our third speaker is Neelima Maniar. Interestingly, this is the first time we have another Rainer, as we Rainmaker folks call ourselves, on the panel other than me. Neelima heads operations and customer delight at Rainmaker and is a seasoned professional with 26 years of diverse experience spanning different sectors, from HDFC Bank, compliance and leadership recruiting, and so on and so forth. Neelima's focus has been on business development, and she has excelled in facilitating hiring processes. Notably, She has also spearheaded a successful gender diversity mapping initiative for a multinational corporation. Neelima completed her education at Sydenham Institute of Management Studies. Thank you, Neelima, for joining, and I'm hoping that we are able to really use all of your experience, including that at Rainmaker, to sort of bring out a different flavor to the conversation than we normally have at our webinar. So thank you for joining, and delighted to have you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for the lovely introduction and the warm welcome. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion with esteemed panelists along. Thank you.
And our fourth speaker panelist is Debopama Roy. She's the General Counsel at Airmeet. She's recognized for her exceptional contributions to corporate law. In fact, this year, she was named General Counsel of the Year at the Indian GC Awards 2024. Debopama's specialization is really compliance and risk management. She completed her LLB from Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University and her LLM or Masters in Law from the Indiana University Maurer School of Law. She has had more than a decade-long career, including roles at Stanza Living and OYO. She demonstrated exceptional skills in policy analysis, contract negotiation, and privacy law. So Debopama, again, wonderful to have you with us. Really looking forward to sort of your contributions to today's discussion. And thank you so much for making time for our session today.
Thank you, Anthony, for the kind words, and look forward to the discussion with all the esteemed panelists here.
Wonderful. All right. So without further ado, I'll actually kick off our discussion with a little bit of stats. So this, some of this we have shared before, but I'm just going to keep it very brief for our participants and viewers. So the good news is that while women occupy about 32% of senior managerial positions in mid-market businesses globally, in the Indian workforce, the representation is 36%, which is higher than the global average. So that's sort of a real big positive for us as Indians, and something that I think we can be proud of. However, obviously, as with all things, there is room for improvement. In about 5% of these companies, there are no women in senior leadership positions at all. So that's definitely an area of improvement for us. The percentage of women leaders across various industries. So we've kind of collated some data across different industries that you'll see here. In tech, and I think this is, I guess, something that we have known that the percentage of women in tech is probably not as high as other sectors. 17% women hold mid-level managerial roles, and only 13% are employed for director level positions. So you can see that in tech, there is definitely significant room for improvement. In healthcare, again, 18% of the leadership positions in the healthcare industry are occupied by women, but they continue to unfortunately earn 34% less than their male counterparts. So again, even in the healthcare sort of sector, we have some room or a lot of room for improvement and growth. In the social sector, women make up almost 53% of the workforce, right? So that's a wonderful stat. I mean, it's we are sort of in positive territory there. But only 34% hold managerial positions, and only 19% lead such organizations. So again, while the social sector is doing significantly better than tech, healthcare, and probably a whole host of other sectors, and we have just taken 2 or 3 sectors more as an illustration than anything else. But there's definitely room for improvement in that area as well. We are all aware that the gender pay gap, and it's been an ongoing discussion. It's something that we have sort of, it's been coming up in the last few years, news articles, and you know, there's a lot of discussions around the pay gap. And I think the pay gap is most visible in the labor segment, which probably covers the agricultural farm segment, but also the blue-collar workforce, where men earn 82% of the labor income, while the share of women's earning is obviously much, much less, approximately 18%. So this is an area that I think there is definitely room for improvement in terms of the pay gap. And uh, as per the global gender gap report, I think it's quite clear that Indian women are paid almost 1/5 of the income earned by men. So the pay gap as well as the share of pay, both are there is a huge gap there. So while there's some good news on the leadership front and how we are sort of doing well as per the global average in terms of the pay gap and share of income, I think there is definitely a lot of room for improvement. South Asian nations, that's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Iran, and Afghanistan, have attained approximately 63% gender parity, which is marking the second lowest score amongst the eight regions. But at the pace at which this is happening, then it is likely that we'll take a good 150 odd years to achieve complete gender parity. So that seems to be extrapolating where we are today. It appears that as per the WEF, it'll take us another 149 years to achieve complete gender parity. Significant work to be done there, and I think that is something that we are all very mindful of, and something that we probably need to sort of keep working towards. Now, to sort of dive into the first segment, really, which is the challenges faced by women in India, especially as they move towards leadership roles. And here, I think societal expectations and gender stereotypes really play a significant role, right? Here, as you can see, and this is fairly interesting stats actually. Nearly 43% of the respondents believe that earning money is mainly an obligation for men, which is basically it's a man's job to bring home the bread. And so that's almost 1 in 2 respondents believe that. However, more than half the respondents, 56%, strongly believe when jobs are in short supply, men should have greater rights to employment than women. And that's an interesting statistic, because we often talk a lot about merit and all of those good things with respect to jobs at the workplace. But if there is if jobs are in short supply, then most respondents believe that men should have priority. So these are the kind of gender stereotypes and societal expectations that we're actually dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Roughly a third of adults feel that childcare should be handled primarily by women. So there's a good mix of these 3 points in here, which I would really sort of want to sort of to get inputs from these panelists based on your real life expectations, lived experiences, and so on and so forth. Work-life balance and lack of support systems. So here, the insights from HR leaders in India are that 37% of female participants expressed a desire to leave their current jobs in India, citing poor work-life balance. While for men, only 4% of the respondents cited this as a concern. And I think we have a good sense for why this is so, right? All right. So without further ado, I'm going to now sort of bring our speakers in, our panelists in. Priya, we'll start with you. You've in your years of experience, now you can see where the challenges are, right? We sort of put some data out there, but of course this is just a snapshot, really. This is just for us to get a sense of where we are today. Yes, we are in a good place with respect to women in the workplace today than we were probably 5, 10, 15 years ago, for sure. But as we can see that the challenges remain, and there is a lot more work to be done. So could you share with us some of your experiences and maybe share your insights into some of the challenges you faced as a woman out there, building your career, climbing the leadership ladder, what if you could share some of your thoughts and experiences with us?
Thank you, Anthony. Maybe I shouldn't be the right one to start this discussion because going back to those slides which you just showed us, where Anthony, if you could just pull that one up again.
Of course.
I forget the percentages. I'm sorry, I didn't
No worries at
memorize
all.
that.
No worries at all. Let me pull that up for you. Give me a second.
Well, while you do that, let me just introduce myself. While Anthony did a good job of it, what he didn't mention that right now I'm on a planned career break. This slide is something which would apply to me, where you said 37% of female participants expressed a desire to leave their current jobs. You can count me one among those 37. Current jobs being the operative word, the current work situation being the operative word. Poor work-life balance. I'm one who's always maintained, and I believe that there is nothing called a work-life balance. I was telling Anthony the other day, it's not a noun. It's work-life balancing. It's a present continuous tense. It's always one side up and the other side down, and then that's what it is. If I've seen someone who's able to do this, I think that's amazing. I would love to see that person. So I guess I'm on one side of the seesaw now, where life. Actually, that's a strange word because work is life too. So, I mean, are you dead when you're working? You're not. So I don't know who coined this work life. Work is life too. It's a kind of life, and your personal life is another type of life, another set of priorities, one set of priorities and another set of priorities. And as the word priorities itself indicates, that you are giving it weightage, you are giving it importance. It's based on your values. So I, for one, wouldn't question why we have 37% females saying, they want to leave their jobs, because priorities change, and let's respect people's priorities. So 4% of men, speaking for myself again and for my husband, I'm sure my husband will not take a break from work. Even if he needs to work 24 hours continuously for 3-4 days, he would still do it. He's not going to say work-life balance to me. He would do it, and then he'll sleep straight for the next 4 days, and then he's back to work after that. So
he's got his balance.
That's his balance. That's his
balance.
That's his balance. I don't see this in a negative light, Anthony. I won't raise an eyebrow even if this goes up to 50%. And again, it depends upon the life stage. Clearly, when I was 25, 30, I was not looking at a desire to leave my current job. No, I was busy climbing the ladder. I was busy getting my bonuses and my promotions. But you reach a stage in life, and then you think that you are comfortable enough. You develop. I mean, let me come back to priorities. Let me not make this personal, but it's your priorities, you weigh, and then you decide this is not the right place to be. So I really will not view any of these figures that you have put out here negatively. It is not a cause for concern. It's good to know. It's good to know. And for a company, I think, if companies were to track this, I think it would help them manage their workforce and their productivities better. Resource management could be more effective, depending on person's priorities. But as an indicator for a nation, I wouldn't see this as something negative.
Sure. So fair enough. The work-life balance piece, fair enough. And I'd also like to touch upon the sort of pay parity piece as well. Is that something, Priya, that you believe should be something we should be concerned about? Or is that kind of linked to the fact that women prefer a work-life balance, and therefore there should be a difference in pay parity?
I think this is a very complex response, to this question, Anthony. And before I delve into that, I think somewhere again you had brought up a number saying, it was about 18%. I know I have a farm and I pay female laborers 50% less than what we pay male farmhands. For instance, we pay the male farmhand 700 rupees per day, and the woman gets 350. Now,
Why is that?
Why is that? Because the men, it is assumed, to do the heavy lifting, right? They work, they do a lot more physically strenuous work than what the women do. That is an assumption. The women do not do such strenuous work. And that is something, it's left to debate, but that's the assumption. It's not my call. It's not my pay. I pay as per market.
Correct.
It's not my call. Yeah, the rates are not my call. So here again, if you could bring up that slide, Anthony, the one where you're talking about 18%, I think the one just before this, pay parity.
Sorry.
I think it said 18% of what men.
Yeah, I'm looking for that. I'm not sure why this is
somewhere.
This one. This
yeah.
one.
Okay, I think this is a total share of labor income. Okay, maybe this is not the right comparing apples and oranges, but typically it's 50%. If you go out there into the rural labor market, it's 50%. Now that's because they do different work. You don't find them doing the same thing. But if you come back to the urban corporate scenario and, a male and a female doing the same job, measured by the same standards, the same output, where the expectation is the same, expectation of output is the same. If there is a pay gap, then it's definitely not acceptable. And my experience is, I think that is still a challenge in India, getting the same. Now that earlier, I know compensation was something everyone discussed, but now it's HR expects that compensation is not discussed. And what happens in the process is women do end up getting, I wouldn't say significantly, but considerably less than male. I've seen that in practice. I have experienced it, and in my earlier days when I was much, much younger. And I see that happening today, mostly at the mid levels.
Understood. Thank you, Priya. Anjali, I'd like to bring you in to the discussion, particularly with respect to the gender pay gap. Is it something that, in your experience, you've seen? Is it there, or do you believe that at the corporate level, in most corporates, you get paid by what you do, and therefore there is really no gap as such, and it's more of a blue collar thing?
So maybe before answering that, Antony, I'll just come in and say, I think before we even get into pay gap, I think it's important to just understand the potential that we see today for women in leadership positions is definitely a lot more, right? And I think that has changed over time. And in fact, if you look at it today, in the next decades to come, I think there's a large potential than what was earlier. And while, yes, your numbers about, the leadership positions still look fairly dismal, I think today a lot of the organizations are realizing, and are either realized or in the process of, realizing that if you want the best talent pool, you have to do something about this, right? And I think the whole numbers have to be fixed. So I think that's one sort of revelation that has come about. And it's not been an easy journey, but I think today, while we don't see as many women in leadership, we are seeing a lot of them making their way to the top. But at the same time, I wouldn't say it is as easy for women as it is for their male counterparts, right? It is still a journey, and it's still an experience of struggling and finding their feet, finding their voice in whether it's leadership, whether it's boardrooms, So I think along with making this realization, the other thing that also has to happen, and pay is one of them, is the organizations have to start removing these barriers that held back women from making that move. And I think to the point Priya was making, I think very, very valid that it's a choice, it's your priorities. But if you have these kind of numbers, you have the data, I think organizations who want to have the best talent pool, and to the other point where women who want to come back to work but who are forced for various reasons, there is that understanding today that these barriers have to be removed. And coming to the point of pay gap, that is one of them, right? And I think the way that this can happen is, one, for organizations to realize, to remove these barriers, amend policies, amend their practices internally, look at the facts. Also, I think it's a simultaneous journey of having more women in the workplace. So I think it's a chicken and egg situation, right? It is, while you want to make organizations more aware and they need to do more, we also need to bring up the strength of women in the workplace, because at the end of the day, men are holding more more men are holding positions of power, right? So while we can see this happening slowly, we have to enable it, nurture it, and have more women, one, enter into the workforce, two, have more women in the leadership positions. So then there is that community that supports this. There are numbers that support it, right? Because then it becomes an easier conversation to have. Today, if you ask me about the pay gap or the gender pay situation, I think today competence is definitely, in my view, rewarded in most organizations. But I think the numbers are not yet there, right? So I think while we still struggle to find more women in leadership positions, it is important for people in leadership positions, women or men, to address these issues of pay gap, of having the right policies, of removing these barriers that obstruct women to be able to fulfill both their roles.
So thank you, Anjali. In fact, I think a point that you made about removing barriers really resonated with me, and I think that is really if we are to move forward in the direction we are going and create a more equitable workplace for all, I think those barriers need to sort of be changed. And Anjali, your inputs, and Debopama, you as well, I'd like to bring you in, because you're both lawyers. You work in organizations where you've possibly had, uh, a voice in, if not creating and putting together policies. What is, Debopama, first, if you could hear from you, and Anjali, again, back to you on policy creation, drafting. What kind of challenges do you see? Because I think that's one of the barriers that women face at the workplace, right? That policies are not really friendly, and it could come back to Anjali's point about how there are probably just not enough women at the workforce, in different workforces, or also in positions of power, because that is where decisions are made. So, what's your experience been in that regard?
So Anthony, coming to policies, I'll delve into the behavioral part of organizations. And I'll tell you why behavioral part, because an organization is not just a corporate entity. It's made up of human beings. Okay. And the psychological part, the behavioral part of the society affects when it comes to policy and its implementation. And having worked in various jurisdictions across, in India and abroad, I see, when you're talking in parlance to India, we have certain stereotypes in our society and certain thinking patterns which kind of uh, become a hindrance in policy implementation, or as well as, it also gives a little bit edge on the policy implementation, particularly in India. Because if you see the stats which you have mentioned, that we are on a higher percentage compared to other, the global statistics on women workforce in India. Why so? I'll tell you why. Uh, it's the first, when I come as a lawyer, I step into policy implementation with my HR and my stakeholders, my higher management. Um, I always try to judge what is the behavioral pattern, what is the thinking process, thought process of the leaders, and that helps a lot on drafting those policies, and also seeing the cultural culture and the environment and the service of the product which is being laid out by provided by the organization. uh, for example, if you're in a manufacturing sector, or you are in in a organization where your products requires you to be in person, and they require the workforce to be in person for a considerable period of time, you cannot take off that frequently, or you would not be, because the product or the service which you're providing, the nature of the business does not permit you so, then you have to mold yourself according to that, obviously within the parameters of the legal parameters. But when you have certain, like you have services, you have soft skills which are required, then you can have those leeways to women workforce, you can have bring on those flexibilities, you can be more women friendly, women centric, or I would say on a gender neutral basis, more friendly towards young parents. Or it's not only women, it's also men also, because nowadays, coming to my generation and the future generation, the workforce which comes with the temperament, because I'm right now in a startup environment, we have an average age of from between 28 to 30. That's what the average age is over there in the workforce. You come up with a lot of men who are caregivers. So you have to have the policy very gender neutral and also flexible. And that only comes from the part when you have your management, when you have your society, and when you have your the business you are into, that permits you. These are various factors. There's few of the factors which I have mentioned, but there are other factors as well. And these are the various factors which kind of influences when you you draft a policy, you kind of roll it out, and then implementation to it. So these are the things, factors which comes to play when doing policies.
It's very, very interesting, Debopama. In fact, one of the points that you made is interesting, which is you're seeing a lot of men now at the workplace who are caregivers. Uh, I think it's a sign of the times, right? We may not see it in some of the companies that have been around for much longer, maybe as we'd like to call it, old school companies, but maybe a lot of the new startups where you actually are seeing a lot more sort of parity in terms of it's not the woman is not assumed to be the caregiver, and that role is being shared. Possibly a couple decides that you know what we between us we decide who has better earning potential, and then accordingly decide that the other person becomes the caregiver. So it's very interesting, and I feel like we are moving towards a time where this is likely to be the norm, where it's going to be a lot more egalitarian than it is today in India. But it's very interesting to note that. Um, Thank you so much for that, Neelima. One of the things that and I've been working closely with you over the last couple of years, and I've watched with a lot of admiration how you manage uh, pretty much everything that's on your plate, right? So home, work, everything, and that's I think it's like you are always on 24/7. Um, so what how has your experience been? In particularly, I'd like to sort of get your views on the whole uh, work-life balance debate. How has your experience been, and your take sort of on that?
Thank you, Anthony. I was listening to Priya, Anjali, and Debopama, and I could resonate so much with all the things that they said. The first thing, what Priya mentioned was prioritizing, right? So similar experience started working at the age of 23 and you're like gun-go in a corporate setup. And suddenly, you are married, you have children, your priorities change, and you start looking at work with a different perspective. You want to be professional, you want to continue working, but your priorities have changed. Now, the question is the organization that you're working for acknowledging that this priority has changed for you and therefore accommodating you in the organization? So if I go back 25 years, back when I started working, maternity breaks came in, and the organizations gave you the break. And then it's like, okay, you go back and suddenly, you may want to shift in your role. You may want something more easier, which helps you balance your work life. But my personal experience has been that the organization perhaps was not prepared for these kind of changes. The expectation was that, if you have a role, you continue with that role. That was one thing I experienced in my career. And then, of course, the day comes and you say, okay, I can't deal with this. I need to, quit the company. I've been lucky, if I may say, that thereafter, whenever I took up opportunities, I got the opportunity to, have flexible working hours. I got work from home. Work from home, something which was never thought of maybe 16, 17 years ago. You had multinationals having that concept. But in India, if I would tell anybody I work from home, they would say, what is work from home? How do you work from home? So there's a lot of discipline involved. Even if you're working from home, the family needs to know that, okay, she's working from home means she's working. It's not that, she's available at your beck and call. So I was fortunate. I got these opportunities, and I did realize over a period of time that a lot of organizations started recognizing and appreciating this, as an opportunity for women, giving them that opportunity that, all right, we give you the flexibility. End of the day, what matters is the work has to be delivered, right? Having said that, I also will go back to Anjali's point of, gap in your salaries. That became a tool for your organization to tell you that, okay, I'm giving you this flexibility, I'm giving you a work from home, therefore I can't match your salary to your counterpart who's a male. And I think women being a little emotional about it, and the fact that, okay, at least I'm having a job, you kind of accept everything that comes your way. Like, okay, I got the flexibility to work, I have a job, I'm happy, and it's all right if I'm getting underpaid. So those are few things which I have experienced. On the policies, I think what Debopama mentioned was very interesting. And I think it's, a vicious cycle that initially there were not many women in the leadership roles. Therefore, the policies were not very inclusive. Okay. Because the policies are not inclusive, there are not many women in the leadership role. So I think that becomes a vicious circle. So I think right now things are changing, and we are all seeing that. We've seen the recent budget, where there's been so much of an importance given to having more women at the workforce, at the management level, generally even at a mid level. So I think things are changing. Women are getting the opportunities, and the other aspect which I also appreciate is, the male men becoming the caregivers. The generation is changing, so you have seen a lot of male colleagues who are in positions now, perhaps also seen their own mothers juggle and struggle, and therefore they respect and appreciate what their own mothers have done, and worked in corporates, and therefore they pass on that the right attitude to their spouse now, that, all right, you can continue working, I'm going to be there, I'm going to help you, and I'm going to balance things for you. So yeah, that's my take on this.
Well, thank you, Neelima. In fact, I on the point of men being caregivers, as as I think more about it, I've realized that I have actually a few friends who have taken the conscious decision to be caregivers to their children, and it's they have left. In fact, one of them has left a very successful career with a large law firm, in order to sort of be with his two kids and spend time with them, and while his wife works and earns. So it's definitely a trend. I suppose what's going to happen, the way I see it, is, like I said before, that a couple's going to take a decision on the basis of who possibly has a higher earning capacity. But in some instances, I'm also seeing situations where the husband is taking a backseat because the wife wants to pursue her passion. There is something that she wants to do. It may not necessarily make them a lot of money, but it is a passion for her, and they both agree. So I feel like we are moving towards a situation where there is going to be a lot more conversations between a couple in terms of allocating responsibilities. It's not like it was 20-25 years ago, where the roles were very clearly bracketed. Today it's a lot more flexible. It's a lot more about a conversation, more equitable, uh, before decisions are sort of made in that respect. All right. So, with that, I want to move to our next segment, which is really, uh, on unconscious biases that. So, I'm just going to move the slide. Yeah. So, the biases, which again, I think we have touched upon in terms of how those are changing today. The conventional stereotype is that positions men as taking charge and women as taking care, which kind of places women in a double bind situation, so to speak, right? If a woman is seen as taking charge, then she's seen as being too assertive and therefore not a likable leader. And we're going to come to success and likability as well, a little beyond. This issue places unrealistic expectations on women, expecting that they are able to strike a balance between being assertive and compassionate without being labeled overly aggressive. And I'm sure all of you may have faced this particular sort of situation at some point of time in your life, not necessarily at your. So these stereotypes therefore force women to make twice the effort as compared to men to validate their capabilities, to show that I can walk the fine line, but I also obviously have to now work harder to show that I'm as competent, if not more, than my male counterpart. Now, I just want to be in debate. Rather, I think the objective really is that a lot of these issues come out of biases that we carry, that are ingrained in us, probably over centuries, not even decades, but centuries. How do we? I think overcoming those biases is something that we are seeing today with the newer generation, where those biases sort of are. Uh, they don't carry people don't carry the same length of biases that they used to previously. So continuing with this is to introduce a concept called imposter syndrome. And it's a syndrome where uh, an individual, but particularly women, feel they tend to downplay their achievements. I mean, to sort of put it very crudely, a lot of women feel like they don't belong there, or they're an imposter in that sense, that they don't really deserve to be there. Or if they are there, they attribute the success to external factors, or despite sort of achieving everything that you have, there is still a sense of inadequacy, right? And interestingly, KPMG's study found that 75% of women executives across industries have experienced the imposter syndrome in their careers. How do we overcome this? How do we deal with it? So this is something that I would like for all of us to kind of touch upon, and also want to leave you with the very famous Heidi versus Howard case study, where a group was presented with the case study of an entrepreneur named Heidi, emphasizing her outgoing personality and a network, etc. And group two was given the exact same case study, but Heidi was replaced with Howard, right? So two groups of people have got the exact same case study. The only difference is that Heidi, a woman, has been replaced with Howard, a man, in the second case study. Impressions that the group came away with, basically both groups equally respected Heidi and Howard. However, Howard received higher likability scores. Right now, this is where it gets interesting. Despite the same story, the data created different impressions based on the gender mention. And ultimately, and unfortunately, Heidi was perceived as selfish, while Howard was perceived seen as appealing. Right. So this is why the whole bias discussion becomes very, very important, right? Because you can see that this is a clear case where, despite everything being the same, all things being the same, the gender made a difference to how the case studies were perceived. So this kind of dovetails into sort of the point about success versus likability, right? And it is generally said that the more successful a man, the greater his likability. The more successful a woman, the worse her likability. Now, these are very generic statements, but it's all out there in terms of how people perceive this. So, I'd like for us to just give this, and particularly we have a sort of a panel of accomplished leaders. Is this something that you have faced uh, as leaders in your careers, in terms of the imposter syndrome, or the bias that you faced, the success versus likability bias that often tends to creep in? What are your thoughts? And maybe, Debopama, we can start with you this time around. Get your views.
Yes, Anthony, it's a very interesting thing, it's a study which is based on again behavioral sciences, and I'll tell you why this happens. It's something uh, what my experience come from, where it comes from is that uh, since your inception days as a young child or a young adult, when you are in a family setup, in a social setup, you have had come across remarks, especially in our generation, where the older generation, our mothers, our grandmothers, who were working, who were part of the workforce, we have often heard from relatives or some acquaintances coming, oh, so your mother is working, so I think you must be, you must be missing her a lot, and things are not done properly. So I think that's why, and even it's in the school also, I have
You're a
come
neglected
across where my
child
mom
because your mother's
started
working.
working when I was in as a teenager. I was 11 or 12, and she got back to the workforce. She's like, now my kids are grown up. You are two daughters. They've grown up. They're pretty much, they can take care of themselves. So let me get back to and start my own enterprise. So she started, and one such incident was in the school, and my teacher comes to me and went, oh, so you just have sandwiches for lunch. I don't see you having proper food because I guess your mother is busy. She can't cook for you. I'm like, excuse me, it's not about my mother being busy. It's because it's my choice. I cook my own thing because I'm a 11-year-old. I have my own choices, and I'm just doing it for myself. My mom can cook for myself, and she has plenty of time. She's balancing her life. So these things foreplay, and it foreplays similarly with the opposite gender as well. When a man is coming to the workforce, that man family is always saying, you are a son, aap ladke ho, you are a boy, you have to earn for the family, you have to get married. If you don't earn well, you don't study well, you don't get a good bride. So these are very social stereotypes, you know
Stereotypes.
they're very stereotypical comments which you have to, and you can only overcome these if your grooming at home is something where you see gender equal roles for both your parents, in your way parents, in your grandparents, among your relatives. If you have seen gender equal roles, and I have been very fortunate enough, Anthony, I would say that I've seen very gender equal roles at my place, and I see and I come across my acquaintances, my friends, and my peers in my workplace, where I've seen women taking a back seat, given though they had more merit academically. And to be honest, women are achievers, overachievers when they're in the university levels. If you see all the first top ranks in schools and universities, and if you see in the board examination as well, you see a lot of girls who are doing tremendously well.
Very well. Yeah.
But the concern is, where is that talent going off? They're just vanishing in the workforce. And it's because we stereotype ourselves as, on gender biases. So as a society, if you have somebody to look up to, if you have somebody to know, you need that inclusivity or that coherent attitude in your society and from the initial days. Like I have two kids. I'm a young mother. I have a son and a daughter. And we have made it very clear that, whatever my son does, irrespective of whether, you have to have certain life skill sets. Similar with my daughter as well. So as parents, as individuals, you have to take that conscious decision. You have to make that environment conducive for your kids, and to make that the future generations, it goes after generation. And if you have to take that attitude out, you have to work from the start, from your birth. You have to make those environments possible. So that is my take on this approach.
But I think we should have more role models, right? I think that really sort of deal with me, and I think we need to have a more gender diverse role model scenario where it's not just you have men that you talk to, but also women who have successfully sort of climbed success at whatever it is that they want, not just the corporate workplace, but whatever it is that they want. Priya, I have some interesting and sort of views on this. I'd love to hear your take on this also, sort of, particularly from the perspective of biases that we carry. How important are they? What can we do to deal with the biases? Because those biases transform, things like the imposter syndrome that we see that a lot of women experience at the workplace, right? So would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Thanks, Antony. I hope you're hearing me, because I wasn't hearing Antony clearly. So I hope that's not a network issue at my end. You're able to hear me?
I'm able to hear you clearly. Right. Would you like me to repeat my question, or?
No, I got it. You were breaking up, so I thought maybe it's my network on the blink. Yeah. Well, this whole thing about unconscious bias. I was just watching a Netflix documentary yesterday where I'm very interested in archaeology. And I was listening to this, watching this documentary on, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Göbekli Tepe, which is this archaeological site that they discovered in Turkey, which kind of shatters all what we believed till now about how old the human civilization is, right? Now, apparently, the human civilization is not 3,000 or 6,000 years old as believed till now. This site is actually is about 13,000 years old. And they're still discovering. So here we're talking about unconscious bias and social behaviors. If we are a 13,000-year-old social animal, what we are effectively trying to do today is try and dismantle 13,000 years of social norms and beliefs. Okay, that's what we are up against now. For 13,000 years, the man has been the hunter-provider, the woman has been the person tending the fire and the next generation of humans. We're trying to change all of that in the last 100 years, or 200 years, as the case may be. Industrial revolution, maybe. So this is not easy. It's not easy to change. It's not going to happen overnight. And there's no point in pointing fingers and getting upset over this, because as you rightly said, the title said, it is an unconscious bias. people don't know that they're biased. They're not doing it to hurt you. That's how they've been programmed to think. It's almost, I mean, 13,000 years, can I say it's been programmed into their DNA? It should be, you know. If I have the nose of my great aunt, I can very well have the thinking of my great great grandfather, right? So now we're trying to change it all. And why? I mean, I'll be brutally honest here. Is it because corporates love women? Are we really trying to improve the lot of women? No, we just want a more productive and profitable workforce. It's as simple as that. So let's call a spade and then see what we can do about it. I'll go back to Anjali's point. What can we do about it? Yeah, that's history, and no point in talking about that more beyond this. What can we do about it? Anjali did mention we need to increase the women in workforce. And why do we need to do that? Not just to increase the number of women. If you need to change the culture, you need to change behavior, you need to change attitudes, you need to change thinking, then you need to change the demography. So by changing the demography of your workforce, you can bring about these changes in thinking, changes in attitude, changes in beliefs. I was just looking at a report which said, if in a candidate pool, you're interviewing for a position and there's a candidate pool, and there's just one woman in that candidate pool, the chances of her getting recruited is 0, right? But if there are, let's say, 3 or 4 women in that candidate pool, the chances of a woman getting selected for the job increases substantially. And why is that? I mean, why is that? It's just that it changes the way the human thinks. Now, so that's actually the background to all of these biases that Debopama, you were talking about. It's just years of conditioning where the woman tended the hearth. The man went out and provided for the family. It can't change overnight. It just cannot change overnight. It has to be done slowly. And if you try to force the changes, which is why I'm not very much in favor of all of these so-called programs where you're trying to push a square peg into a round hole. I would say if you have a square peg, create a square hole. Don't try to force a square peg into a round hole. You may, but you'll damage either the hole or the peg. That's what's going to happen. So there are biases. It is a fact. I can give you a dozen examples of biases, but what difference does it actually make? I mean, I started my career 27, 28 years ago. Things were a lot different. Hey, we didn't have the internet, right? We didn't have Windows. So we had WordStar. I used to type my reports in A.F. Ferguson and WordStar. So it's different. I think today, in comparison, we have a much more conducive workplace. Actually, the women of today should not be cribbing because it's so much. Then I had 3 months of maternity leave. I mean, I'm envious of the woman who gets 6 months today, thanks to lawmakers like, Debopama and Anjali sitting here. We have 6 months today. I had 3 months and I came back in 2 months because the same thing. If I don't go back there and do my job, somebody else is going to get it. I left my little baby who was 2 months old and I came back to work because the project had started and I didn't want somebody else stepping in. So yes, I've been through the rat race. I've been through the grind. I've been through a very, very, very competitive environment. I was in a big 4, which was in the growth phase, where everybody was running after the same carrot and you get stamped all over if you don't get the carrot in time. But things are much different now. Biases definitely are changing. Like you had rightly said, today the workforce, the men in the workforce today have seen their mothers and they're more understanding. It wasn't the case before. 20, 30 years ago, men won't make eye contact with you when I go to speak to a client, they won't make eye contact. So you go there with a male colleague, the person prefers to look at the male colleague. And so you ask a question, the answer goes to the male colleague and you're like, damn. So that's changed. I don't see this generation doing that. Not so many, unless you go back to the very old timers. But this 10th generation, you definitely have men standing up and opening the door for you, right? It happens. So I think there's a lot of improvement. And I think at the end of the day, today we've reached the stage where, yes, it's not a level playing field, but we're getting there and we're pretty close to it, if you ask me, despite what all these numbers say. In the corporate world as we know it, which is where all of us are working in, and I'm not talking about the agricultural, the workforce, nor am I talking about those in the industry. Industry is a different ballgame, when you're on the shop floor. I was an auditor once upon a time. I went to this factory and then I had the coordinator come back and tell me, say, ma'am, anything you want from the shop floor, you please tell us, we'll get it for you. We don't want you going to the shop floor. And I said, why? I said, I want to understand it better. He said, no, we'll bring them here and we'll explain it to you. We don't want you going there. And I said, what? He said, ma'am, you're a distraction. We don't want you. Yeah, we don't want you. I get angry over that and I can say, how dare you? But it's a fact. If the guy is going to look at me walk past and he puts his finger into that machine, the company has a huge liability. So let's call a spade out here. So I was a distraction. If I go there, if nothing else, I had my dupatta flying. They told me that. They said, you can't walk in with a dupatta like that. So, these are hard facts. So compared to that, I think the environment that we work in, you and I think everybody on this call, I think we are pretty much almost there to a level playing field, and it all comes down to individual competence. It's your competence. If you are not getting ahead, you look at yourself and ask whether you are the square peg who's trying to get into a round hole. If that's the case, then there's no point screaming discrimination. There's no point screaming, lack of diversity. I'm not saying there are no biases. There will be biases and they will have to fade away. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think the time has come, and I'm saying this because I've been an ethics officer for 10 years, listening to people's and watching and hearing and investigating and digging up stuff about what people are doing when no one's watching. And when it comes to women, I've seen a lot of times is, I think they're not investing much in developing their own competence. I think we need more clarity on what our values are. What do you value at the end of the day? Again, going back to my point on priorities. You want to have a baby, you want to have babies, you want to have spend a lot of time at home, but you also want to climb up that ladder, and you're up against someone who really is not too eager to get home at 6 o'clock. He'd rather go home at 9:30, 10. It doesn't matter. Maybe the wife's happier too because she's watching a serial. And then you say, no, I will leave the office at 6 o'clock. I will put in the effort between 9 and 6. And there is someone who's actually putting in more hours, and then you are compared, and then there are perceptions, and then there are these biases which kick in. And it's not black and white. It's not yes and no. This is not a digital story that we're talking about. It's all very analogous. And then that's when the challenges come up. So it's both. What I'm trying to say, just to summarize, it's both external and internal. I think the external environment has changed significantly for the better. Not yet there, but almost there. I think women also now need to put in that additional effort, to reevaluate and be very sure. The imposter, I think I've taken up a lot of time. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Maybe I'll come back if I have time later. But I think that a little bit of women need to do a little bit of introspection also as to what is it that they really want, what women want. I think there's a movie, but yeah, that's it. I don't know if I've strayed from the topic, Antony, but that's
no, not at all, Priya. I think I think the perspective that you gave is useful, right? And I found that very interesting, that your comment about 13,000 or 15,000 years of civilizational bias, and it goes probably even beyond that. 15,000 years is humans as a civilization, civilized beings, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, as primates and other Neanderthals, we've lived for much longer on this planet. And again, the roles there might have been pretty similar to what roles have been played by humans, men and women both, even up to 13,000 years. So fair enough. Those are the unconscious biases that we carry, right? Non-conscious biases that we carry.
I think the point, the changes, if I may just complete, the changes
Sure.
are that we are seeking in our society today is not driven by nature, as has been any of our evolution aspects. So if you go back to Darwin's theory and say from fish we've become humans, it was enforced from the outside. But these, when I say natural reasons, but the reasons that we are seeking to change today, the reasons for this is not natural. This is something man-made. It's economic. That's what I'm trying to say. It's all economic.
So this is a change that is being forced by humans due to economic factors.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Anjali, you've been awfully quiet. Would love to hear your thoughts. Evolution, biases. What's your take?
It's a very interesting topic, and I think we can go on and on. And as I was telling you, Antony, earlier when we spoke, along with my current role, I'm also a sponsor for the DEI program at my company, Tata Technologies.
Yes.
And these are all topics that we've been debating and discussing and deliberating with the DEI team in my support for their endeavors. And I think it's a mix of everything. I think Priya made some very, very interesting points about the entire unconscious bias being there for long. And when we sort of looked inward and saw where these exist, I think the point that she made, right, that you can't blame, you can't finger point, you can't bring everyone into a room and, say this is going to change, because it's been there and it's normalized, right? So I think two things that can be done. Of course, you can follow it up with trainings and awareness, but it is going to take time to address. But two areas that I think that can and need to be done is, one is, of course, I think from an organization's perspective, I think setting the tone at the top. And I think that's again comes back to you as an organization, as leadership, want to bring this change, then you have to walk the talk. So when you see these biases exist or happen in front of you, I think it's important to call those out.
Call it out. Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a responsibility of all leadership, and all of us being in these positions in our company or organizations, whether men or women, I think have to do that. And I think if we don't do that and say, look, we'll address it, I'll talk to that person later, it's not going to happen. So I think it's important to understand and everyone to realize that that kind of behavior is condoned. Yes, it has existed, but along with follow it up with awareness, training, do it in the right sensitive manner, but ensure that, from top down, this is something that everybody speaks the same language in an organization if we want to start addressing this, right? And the second thing I think starts with the women, right? I think it starts with each of us, making sure that while yes, there are these stereotypes that people get bucketed in, I think it is important to play to your strengths, right? As a woman leader, and the reason that I was talking earlier, that women bringing in women or bringing in the best talent today is an economic decision, as Priya rightly said, right? You want the best talent for the company to do well. So it's not so much of, it's definitely doing the right thing, but it's also doing the right thing from an economic perspective. Right. So I think if you bring in the right talent, it's important for women, and the strengths that a woman brings to the table. I think today organizations are realizing it. In fact, there are these programs of women coming back from a career break and all of these initiatives. It's because I think people, leadership, companies are realizing that one is, of course, the strengths and the competence, but it's also the other softer aspects that women leaders or women in a certain role can bring to the table as opposed to the counterpart, the male. So I think that is important for women to realize and not sort of try and fit into a mold that you're used to seeing or you think is important in order to fit in, right? But then comes the challenge of Heidi versus Howard about likability and being the popular one. And I think that is again something that's been programmed in women to, and I think Debopama pointed that out. Since children, you are being told that you've got to be the likable one, the obedient one, or, you need to say the right things. So I think it's a tough situation. I would say it's not easy. I think as it is not easy for the society and organizations and everybody else to sort of make that change overnight and do it. I think it's important for women also to realize that, play to your strengths, but at the same time, have that balance where you're assertive and you're not afraid of not being the liked one, right? Because I think that will change. Hopefully it will change soon, right? We see areas where it has already changed, and I think at a certain point it will start changing when these biases slowly start disappearing. But it's a combination of all of these things, is I think the point that I'm trying to make. It is about, training women, training all other, and I won't just say women, it's about diverse, diverse areas of, from a diversity perspective, all types of, diverse population, training them, bringing the awareness in the other side of the organization. I think it's a combination of both having the right policies, having the right practices where you sort of ensure that bad behavior, these biases are called out. And then, of course, I think, like I said, it starts with the marginalized group, whoever we're talking about, build their confidence, and I think competence builds confidence, right? So ensure that you have the right competence, and then, be not afraid to assert yourself and, ask for what you need. I think that's a very, very important quality that typically women do not have at the start of their career, and it is something that you learn through your journey. And I think I can speak for myself. It's important that what you bring to the table, and you're able to ask for what you need to deliver it and assert yourself.
So all fantastic points, Anjali. Actually, I was making notes while you were speaking, and I realized that many of the things that you said are really great, great takeaways for young aspiring leaders, because these are all the things that often can become hurdles in your way if you are not approaching your career from the right perspective. And also, as an organization, many of what you said really resonate in terms of what organizations should be doing, what senior leadership should be doing, calling out biases. I think those are all things that. To close out this discussion, Neelima, very quickly your thoughts, because we are running quite behind schedule. So maybe if you can just share your thoughts with us, and then I'll move on to the last discussion point for the day, and then we can close the event.
Sure, Anthony. So, we've been speaking about women at leadership level, and suddenly what struck me is that even if you look at history, Indian history, we've had women at the leadership level. We've had Sarojini Naidu, we've had Ahilya Bai Holkar, we've had, Rani Lakshmi Bai, whom we call Jhansi Ki Rani. We've had an Indian Prime Minister. We have had two, in fact, of course, one current presidents of India. So it's not that we've not had, women at the leadership level, but yes, of course, we're looking at, today the leadership in the corporate world. We are seeing an improvement there. I think corporates are also realizing that, women bring in a lot of transformation with their skill sets, leadership styles. But at the same time, if you look at strategies, we are talking about we need a lot of soft skills in the service sector. That's typically the perception, right? You see more women in the hotel industry, you see more women in the banking BFSI vertical that we call. But are we seeing that kind of inclusivity at the leadership level? Unfortunately, not to the in the manner that it should be there. There was a time a lot of banks had women CEOs, but you look at the data today, we don't have any women CEO even in the private sector banks. Public sector banks, if I'm not mistaken, we have 12 public sector banks. There's only one bank which has a woman CEO. What I'm just trying to drive the point is that we want women at the leadership level because I think people have realized the talent, the skill sets, the softer skills that women bring to the table, but actually giving them that opportunity. On that note, I'll just like to say one thing, that I'm sitting here today as, an employee of Rainmaker. And I'm so proud to say that 43% of our leadership team has women. So it just feels good that you're a part of, the leadership team. You're given that opportunity. And most of the organizations need to identify those skill sets and give the women that opportunity. That's all I'd like to say in this.
Thank you, Neelima. Thank you so much. I am going to actually quickly move to the last segment. Yeah. So we also wanted to kind of round off this webinar on a positive note, to talk about the positive impact of women leaders at the workplace, and I think what Priya said in terms of it being a commercial imperative probably is now kind of resonating in terms of why a lot of the change is happening at the workplace. One of the things that I would like for us to focus on is mentoring, of the importance of being a mentor and being mentored as well, right? Interestingly, 63% of women reported that they'd never had a mentor during their professional journey. And I think clearly the absence of mentorship and limited access to resources really constrain an individual, particularly a woman's capacity to sort of cultivate the skills, the network, and all of those things that are needed for career progression. I think let's not kid ourselves, right? The importance of having a mentor cannot be understated. I think it's very, very clear that every professional should have a mentor, someone they look up to, someone they can go to for guidance. I think it was Arundhati Bhattacharya who mentioned that she almost gave up working at, this is in today's paper, she almost quit her job at SBI before she spoke to a mentor, somebody she considers as a mentor figure, who told her that, look, quitting is not the answer, because getting a job, and those days SBI, right? Getting into SBI itself is a hard-won battle. Why do you want to give it up so easily? I mean, that's long story short, but the rest, of course, is history. And so I think the criticality and importance of mentors, particularly for women aspiring to move up the corporate ladder, cannot be understated. And I think I just want to touch upon that briefly with all of you. But a report by the WEF highlighted essential skills for successful leaders: emotional intelligence, listening abilities, coaching, mentoring proficiency, creativity, right? And it appears that women tend to excel in employing these soft skills as compared to men. So clearly, women leaders can sort of also showcase their skills as mentors and as those who can sort of add value in a corporate setup. Respondents in this Pew Research Center survey, respondents reported that women are significantly better than men in the following aspects of corporate leadership: creating a safe and respectful workplace, valuing people from diverse backgrounds, considering the societal impact of business decisions, mentoring young people, and providing fair pay and good benefits, right? So, additionally, according to Gallup, employees under female leadership reported higher engagement than those working for male bosses, right? This is a 2015 Gallup survey. And another study revealed that companies with strong female leadership generated an ROI of 10.1% per year versus 7.4% for those without. Now, these are incredible, amazing statistics. I just want to kind of emphasize that clearly. And this, I think this is, to Priya's point, and even Anjali touched upon it, right? I think the fact that it is now an economic imperative that we need to have a gender diverse workforce, right? Given the paucity of time, we'll have to wrap up our discussion quickly, but I just want to focus on what I believe is a very critical element of one's career progression, particularly for women, is the importance of finding a mentor, somebody who can guide you, whether formal, informal, doesn't matter. but somebody who can be there when you are sort of going through self-doubt, facing a challenge at the workplace. I've had quite a few mentors in my professional journey, and I can tell you that they have a huge role to play in where I am today, right? And as I'm sure are most of you. So I would love to hear your inputs and what can we do to create uh, and I think this is not just for women, but also for men, right? As allies and as partners, what can we do to create an environment where women uh, who are starting their journey or even progressing in their journey find enough mentors who can guide them so that they're able to make the right decisions and progress at the workplace in a manner that is befitting of their talent, their skills, and so on and so forth. So would love to hear from all of you. Maybe Priya, you can kick off this very quickly with your thoughts, and then we can move around the table, and we'll have to close this discussion in about 5 to 7 minutes.
Sure. Anthony, like you rightly said, it's an imperative for both men and women. So I don't think this is gender specific. The need for a mentor or a need for a sponsor. I personally had a mentor, pretty much like Arundhati's story. I was at the point of quitting. I said a bit of the imposter syndrome. Also, I can't handle this anymore. Big client, big banner. Too many stakeholders. I went to my boss and I said, no, I don't think I can do this. And then sometimes you need to hear it. No, you can. Same thing. You come so far, you're not going to drop the ball now. So that helped me. And I would remember that for the rest of my life. So it doesn't matter if you're male or female, you need a mentor. To climb that corporate ladder, you need a mentor. Women, I think, may need it a little more because of all the other, the inherent reticence that we have. Like, for instance, I'll make a confession. I hate writing my performance appraisal. I mean, hands up all those who hate it. I think that's the worst thing because I hate blowing my trumpet. Oh, I did this much. I brought in this much of business. We are inherently uncomfortable with talking about ourselves and how wonderful and great we are. So most of us, I hope this is a sweeping generalization, I know, but I know most women are uncomfortable. I think that's where we need a mentor to help us actually showcase our competencies. So we have the competencies, we're just a little hesitant to showcase it. And that's what you need to do if you need to get ahead. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a race. And you do have to get ahead. And I think a mentor and a sponsor is definitely will take you much further than what you would do on your own.
So find your mentor or sponsor and make sure that
definitely,
it's critical. Okay, Debopama, your thoughts, your journey, and I know you do something in this space as well. So would love to hear very quickly your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I concur with Priyadarshini and Anjali on working on your strengths, and I have myself, with my experience when I started my journey a decade back, uh, I was in a room full of men, young men, uh, and I was the only girl in the room, and uh, I struggled my way through because I would not be able to understand where do I stand as a lawyer. And luckily, you have to reach out to people. You have to reach out to people as much as possible. And luckily, I came across somebody who mentored me, even though that person was not a lady. Uh, uh, he understood me. He was like a father figure. He understood me in the professional journey, and he mentored me. You know, and I have been lucky throughout my journey in different aspects that I have been able to reach out to people. I had the accessibility, and also I I was open to other people's thought. It's not that you choose your mentor. It only comes to you when you have your flexibility in your mind that it can be anybody. It's not that somebody from your workforce who you are directly reporting to. It can be anybody in the workforce or anybody in your social sphere. So that's where I come from. On giving it back, now I've started kind of engaging with organizations where young professionals, male or female, they want to get back to the journey. They have taken a break, or they're finding it difficult to kind of have that courage, or difficult to kind of understand their potential. So it's not only female who gets through the imposter syndrome. There are young males, there are people who go through imposter syndrome for various reasons in their life. So talking to them how things you can work around, building up that confidence. And the main thing, during this COVID period, which I have figured out, because it was all digital, online, talking to people, taking part of programs, reaching out to people from various parts of the world, I figured out that you have to put that self-confidence, and you have to instill that self-confidence in yourself. You should have that confidence that yes, I can do it, and that gets reflected, and that those affirmations in life get reflected in other people's lives as well. And the most crucial thing which the pandemic and post-COVID has made us everybody realizes that you have to be resilient no matter what. In your early stage, in your midlife career, you will have these kind of crises, and you have to find that person who can help you, support you, and you have to find that resilience in you. So resilience keeps you going, and the confidence keeps you going. So that's what my understanding so far.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Resilience, confidence, uh, these are key attributes that one needs to have, but also additionally finding the right mentor who can guide you throughout the stage of your career. Neelima, your thoughts on this? I'd like Anjali to kind of sum up at the end. So maybe if you can share your thoughts, then we move to Anjali and we can sum up.
Sure. So the key word for me is, boosting your self-confidence. That's where I needed a mentor in my life, because like we've all discussed, we've gone through different stages of life, and, professionally, personally. And there comes a time when, you're so low on your esteem. And I experienced this, that there was a point when I had to, take a call that what are the things, whatever roles I'm playing in life, which one is it that I can eliminate, so that I can be normal, I can manage my time. And trust me on this, the first thing that would come is, okay, maybe I need to take a break in my career. I cannot wash my hands of my domestic responsibilities, your parents, your in-laws, your children, your responsibilities towards your spouse. And that's when I had a mentor who was a very good friend of mine, and she just kept pushing me. And I think she also was a person who, helped me realize that I had some capabilities, some abilities which I was undermining, on my own, just to find an escape route. Okay, I'm not going to continue working. I'm just, going to manage my domestic responsibilities. So for me, that mentor was very important, because she gave me that confidence, and I'm, here today. And interestingly, I do get a lot of feedback from a lot of my colleagues and my ex-colleagues that, Neelima, you are a mentor to us. And I'm like, really? Things change. Suddenly your experiences, you start sharing with your colleagues. You start giving them that pep talk, and, you can do it. See, even I've gone through these things. So that's my take on, this point. But yes, a mentor is important. And like, Debopama rightly said, it's not necessary that it needs to be a woman. It could be any other gender. So, yeah.
No, thank you, Neelima. Thank you so much. And I think what you touched upon is also, I think, equally critical, right? Informal mentoring, where you end up being a mentor, but without, a formal mentor-mentee, is that the word? Mentee relationship. So, yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Anjali, if we could sort of conclude with you, your thoughts, and there are a couple of comments that we can take, but we'll have to conclude shortly.
Sure. I think great insights by the entire panel. I've also been very fortunate in my career to have had a series of mentors, managers, no formal mentor-mentee relationship so that I can sort of recollect, but definitely, I think all of them have helped nurture and have sort of shaped the journey. And I think it's very, very important because I think for all the points that everyone raised, right? I think it's important specifically in a woman's career because of all the challenges and the other roles that maybe one plays more than the other gender. But I think it's an important aspect for any professional, right? And I think areas like self-confidence or, being able to just the ability to network within an organization, how important that is as you're growing. The ability to be able to call out your accomplishments. So wherever you find, I think, a challenge inherently, personally, in the personality or in the way of growing, I think it's important to recognize that and then perhaps also seek out the right mentors as you are sort of, growing in an organization. And I think today a lot of organizations, including the one I'm in, we have found formal mentoring programs because you're recognizing the need for it. But I would say to all professionals watching this, in your career, it's important to be able to recognize that and reach out. And I think if you're lucky, if you're fortunate, you will have people who are rooting for you and who see the potential in you, right? And I think it's important to be able to have that someone tell you, you can do this. There's this challenge. I think if I were to speak for myself, I think, and all of us probably, there have been points in our career where, you've taken that extra step, you've taken that risk, you've picked up a challenge, you've picked up an opportunity, because somebody was able to give you that confidence as well. And I think that is a very, very important aspect of mentoring throughout your career. And I think absolutely, I think all of us now, whoever are in the position, I think need to sort of also think of how do you sort of pay it forward. Right?
Yes, yes.
Sometimes I think it's these experiences, sometimes when we talk in these forums, I hope that, the experiences that we are sharing will help someone realize, I'm also going through the same thing, and, you can sort of overcome it, and these are ways to overcome it. So I think that is a very, very important aspect of mentoring, just sharing your experiences on how you've overcome challenges.
No, in fact, Anjali, one of the objectives of this webinar really is more to create a set of takeaways for people, not just who are attending today, but we're going to put it out on YouTube for a larger group of people to come and watch at their own convenience and take whatever they can out of it. The idea behind having all of you leaders on this webinar was exactly that, to share your experiences, share your thoughts, and put that out there so that others don't necessarily need to, reinvent the wheel, right? We already have a lot of learnings that we can share with the world out there. So that was really the objective. But thank you so much, Anjali, and of course, all of you for your thoughts, that you've experiences, learnings, takeaways, so many things that as this, for even for me, I think I felt like I learned a lot merely by being here with all of you, learning from your experiences. So it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. We have one comment, not a question, but a comment, I think, which has come from Angrija, who says, at AstraZeneca, we also have reverse mentoring, which has built confidence in younger people and or people from any of the minority communities. In fact, I'm currently mentoring a senior director in a senior leadership MBA at university. I also informally mentor several people at my organization across various demographics. All this is possible because I had great mentors at every stage of my career. In terms of mentorship, I feel like if I have had an impact on even one person, my job is done. So thank you so much, Angrija, for sharing your thoughts. And I think reverse mentoring is an interesting concept that has gained a lot of momentum in recent times. I believe senior leaders, CXOs, CEOs are actually actively seeking reverse mentoring from a much younger person, either in their organization or elsewhere, to give them a different perspective. It's not that you can only learn from people who are older or more senior to you. You can always, learning it can come in all shapes and sizes and forms. So it's an interesting concept, the reverse mentoring one, but that's a conversation for another day, because we are definitely out of time. Once again, thank you all, each one of you, for making time for this out of your schedules. I fully appreciate how busy all of you are. So Priya, Debopama, Anjali, and Neelima, thank you all for making time for being on this webinar. I've learned a lot, and I hope all of those who are out there listening have learned. And of course, anybody who's going to be watching this in the future as well. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you,
Thank
Anthony.
All the panelists.
Thank you.